What's good, everybody? So, as it turns out, I'm only susceptible to the coronavirus, and I'm a vector in the presence of top brass. Who'd have thunk it? There's scientific curiosities coming out every day with this disease. Yeah, remember yesterday I showed you my little surgical mask, the Nicky thing they gave me to put on my face that broke while I was working? Well, didn't have it today. Yeah, that's what I thought would happen. It was, show some real care and concern. Now, obviously, it's because there's a shortage of masks. Otherwise, everybody would have masks, but that's kind of my point. That one day was absolutely a symbolic gesture, as I also imagine the masks largely are, despite the current 180 that our health officials have done in terms of the masks. Personally, I don't mind the mask. If people force me to wear the mask, it wouldn't really bother me, aside from the forcing aspect. But if I heard advice to wear the mask that made sense, then I would do it. There's certain contexts in which it does make sense, in which I wish I had a mask. You know, they're saying to make one. Well, in the 80 or so degrees inside those trucks, me wearing a towel on my face, you know, you're gonna say, well, are you gonna risk people's health for your discomfort? I don't think the virus can necessarily live in those temperatures, and even if it could, chances of me being sick are not that high. Yes, asymptomatic carriers do exist. What's the chance, given the numbers of this disease that we're seeing, that I'm an asymptomatic carrier? And I don't see very many people fashioning these things and putting them on their face. That is the only aspect of the mask business that I find to be compelling. If you're somebody working with stuff that goes to people, working in a grocery store, etc., you want to, kind of keep as few droplets from going down onto the food and stuff. But again, I mean, generally, with flus and all the other kind of viruses and respiratory things that we have, we don't take those precautions and we don't see a terribly pandemic spread. And Fauci has recently basically admitted that their estimates were overzealous. And Ron Paul gave a critique of this and said, what this guy Fauci is basically claiming is, well, we weren't wrong in our dire models. What we were wrong about is our ability at containment. So take that statement from Mr. Fauci as you will, and Ron Paul's criticism as you will in the video that I'll link to below. But I think that if you look at the numbers and if you read Mr. Ioannidis' article, who is also an expert, a PhD holder, I believe, that works at Stanford as a professor of virology, you'll see that there's all kinds of views and things, and why we have kind of a corona SAR on the person of Fauci, to me, is in itself suspect. But anyway, it's really interesting how much more seriously I can take something when I write it versus making a video. That's one of the reasons that, on my blog, on my website, where I post, my literary kind of doodlings and more ambitious projects than that. Why I haven't been posting as often is because I get there and I sit down and I write, and I mean, a lot of times I'm very confident in what I've written, but, well, it is if I've written anything at all. But then I'm like, I've got to do more than this, and it just comes to a standstill. It's not exactly a writer's block. It's more of a certain perfectionism, which is why I don't even sit down to write all the time, because I know that I have time constraints, and I know that I'm very, very distracted by various things, both legitimate and not. But really, at the end of the day, I just need to force myself to do it and get a finished product out there. But with video, for some reason, I don't have this problem. I take it less seriously, which is strange because I'm literally putting my face and my stupid motions and my cadence out there, making me absolutely transparent, in a sense, like naked for the world to see as this just random schmuck that I am. But I take that, a lot less seriously and with a lot less trepidation than writing. Is it because writing seems to be more permanent than a video? Which I suppose, in the fact that, the video can really only live on a very delicate, system of chips and electronics and stuff, could be could be true that it's durable, more durable. Like, say, if I had books printed, I'm really fucked up right now because it's I've been awake for a while. But anyway, what you know what I'm saying? Fucking words seem to have more power and weight to them when you write them down. Maybe it's because you were taking that extra steps of consideration, as it's a more slow process, lets you kind of see more readily the various angles and their wackiness of what it is that you're actually trying to say or create. Whereas with just a video, with just me talking, it's more like a conversation. Maybe that's why. But I just thought that was some blog fodder, some food for thought here. Yeah. So I'm gonna briefly examine this line of reasoning that Ron Paul and his host took, and I'm going to do so from a casually sort of critical perspective, not just for the sake of strengthening my own conclusions, which align pretty much with those of Ron Paul, but to give adequate consideration, as per the scope of this video, adequate enough, to Dr. Fauci's claims by quote unquote steelmanning them, at least in the parameter of this little argument that's going to be made. So basically, the information that Ron Paul and his host presented when they looked at the numbers was that less people died during this pandemic than died during the flu. So obviously, there was an overestimation of what was going to happen by this point by our medical professionals. And the medical professionals claim, because the reason that the curve didn't happen is that it was flattened because they were listened to. But we have this kind of non-uniform approach in the United States. Not all states were quarantined. And so how can you say that it's because of these quarantine measures that the spread was stopped, rather than it just being the natural consequence of the virus playing itself out to the population? Well, Ron Paul's co-host goes on to say, Colorado and South Carolina have these similar populations. It just perked my ears up because I'm a South Carolinian. There's about 5 million people in each state. And South Carolina had a mild lockdown, where Colorado's was certainly more draconian. So, given this argument that, hey, that these measures being taken into effect very seriously is what flattened the curve, how is it that South Carolina, with our mild lockdown, I mean, people are riding bikes out there, they're gardening, they're going on jogs, sure, our non-essential businesses are closed, but more or less, people are still allowed to go outside and do their thing, as long as they're, not being dumb. They're not gathering in large crowds, and they're not, standing within makeout distance of grannies. You know what I'm saying? But in Colorado, there's a lot more of that shit going on. Yet Colorado has more deaths. Yeah, that's very strange. But here's my take on this. Colorado has a larger population. I mean, fuck, not larger population. A more densely packed population, I think, because there's, I think, like several big, huge cities there that are. Yes, South Carolina has some touristy areas and has some large places, but they're not as urbanized, I think. I think we have more sprawl, and we're still, despite Colorado being an agricultural state, and this is just me trying to find reasons why we would see this. Just trying to steelman the argument of Dr. Fauci here. Yeah, so maybe it is because of the quarantine working that Colorado does not, have a bigger problem than it could have, based on the fact that they have all these touristy places like Aspen, and probably a very diverse kind of hippity-dippity population of, just these potheads that live up there. But yeah, I don't know that much about Colorado. I'm just extrapolating from stuff I know, just giving external factors as to why. But then on the other hand, there's, if they have this quarantine and their numbers are worse than South Carolina, they had a stricter quarantine, Maybe it's the quarantine itself that causes it, because what Ron Paul has been pointing out for a while, and others, if you put a bunch of people into places where they share ventilation and where they're not getting enough sunlight and thus vitamin D, they run a greater risk of infection. And, the Irish just did a study that's, oh, well, vitamin D helps with COVID resistance. Well, yeah, no shit, it helps with COVID resistance. It's a virus. We've known that our immune defenses against viruses are dependent on things like adequate vitamin supply in the body, and part of the way that you get that is by being out in the sun, which with the English, you thought I was friggin' like being flamboyant or overblowing it about the Gutmensch, but the Gutmensch aren't just particular to Germany. People in England were told that, hey, you can't, they were all, I saw the picture of these people sunbathing, they were all a good respectful distance from each other. That was not allowed. That was verboten. Oh, you got a license for that tanning oil, but they're allowed to exercise. Not allowed to get sun, which gives you vitamin D, but they're allowed to exercise. I guess you can still get sun while you're exercising, but I mean, what's the real difference if these people are not like within snogging distance, to use the British term, of one another? Yeah. Well, this is my little food for thought today. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, I really run out of time so often, just due to all the chores, and there's bureaucratic tasks taking care of this damned house. There's planning to be done. There's food to be cooked. There's relatives to be looked after. Cars to be taken to the shop. The oil to be changed. Oh, I'm not trying to say like I'm some kind of fucking busy guy on top of everything, but when I get down to it and I want to have a moment to like really concentrate on something, again, I have the perfectionists like need to have a certain amount of time set aside where I know I'll be able to focus on something. It so rarely happens these days, just because of these few little responsibilities that I have. And sometimes I can't imagine how people get shit done, but they do. So there's hope. Anyhow, before I do any further babbling, my website is franklinjournal.com, where you'll find stories, ideas, and more. I'm going to refrain from the whole YouTube thing, because I think you know what to do on YouTube for yourselves. Goodbye, everybody.